Good afternoon, folks, and welcome to the fourth Pep Talk live stream. We have been doing these over the last number of weeks, talking about things like attrition, engagement, and today we're going to talk about the move to remote. So naturally, one of the lasting effects, if you like, of the pandemic on work life is the fact that remote working has become a distinct possibility for us all. It used to be just a perk we get maybe 1 day a month or 2 days a month. Now it's actually an option or a request, actually, when people are joining companies, they want to know if they can work remotely. So what we're going to do is kick that topic around today. As ever, I am joined by Niall O'Carroll, who is Chief. Hey, Niall, how's it going? Niall is Chief of Global Partnerships at Pep Talk. And actually, while you're there, Niall, what I'll do is I'll just give a quick little overview of Pep Talk. So Pep Talk, oh, there's the dog. the unofficial third host of the Pep Talk live stream. Pep Talk is a unique team and engagement action platform, and the basis of our project is on getting insights from teams and organizations, turning those into actions, meaningful actions, and then measuring the impact of those actions. So you have a full, if you like, 360 view of where your people are at, how they're feeling about work. We give you things to do to help them feel more engaged with each other at work. And then we measure the outcomes to make sure that we're moving everything in the right direction. That is Pep Talk. So what I'd like you to do now, Niall, is introduce today's guest, who is Gerard Murnaghan from Sprout Social.
Yeah, it's a great pleasure to have Gerard on the show. Gerard is General Manager and Vice President on the international of Sprout Social. He's a SaaS executive, business mentor, investor, board member. Basically a very experienced guy around business, but also a guy who is a leader who cares passionately about the people who work for him. And I had great pleasure of doing some leadership stuff with Ger and his leadership team recently, and found it kind of inspiring. So I was kind of excited to get him on to have his views around this whole area of the future world of work. So I'll hand Ger over to you, Gus.
You're very welcome, Ger. How's the form? How's things in Sprout Social?
All good. Thanks for having me, Niall and Gus, and thanks for introduction, Niall. Great to have you with us a few weeks ago with the team, so appreciate that.
It was a pleasure, man.
Maybe just before we kick in, Ger, could you just give us a bit of a flavour of what Sprout Social do? So I understand it's a scheduling platform, but it's probably just a bit more than that, is it? Or a lot more than that?
Yeah, look, it's a kind of a software platform that sits between your business and all of your social networks. So it's you can imagine it to be like a kind of a middleware software platform that allows you to engage your audience, curate content, publish, and also listen and be able to glean insights and intelligence from the world of social. So it's a pretty smart platform and it's very intuitive, and we got a number of like 30,000 customers now globally who trust us. So we're very fortunate to have that trust from our customers globally as well.
Very, very good. I'm first and foremost, I'm a content marketer at heart. I genuinely have always been a fan of your stuff. You've got some really in-depth, you've always had some really in-depth stuff on your blog, from stats, data, tactics, tricks, hacks. I would encourage anyone who's anyway into digital marketing or social media to at least sign up to their email or check out their blog, because genuinely it is always really good stuff. Not sure how much you're involved in that, Ger. Can you take any credit for that stuff?
I can't take any credit personally, but we've got a fantastic team who build on the content. But to be honest, a lot of the content is from our customers in terms of watching their behaviors and habits and seeing where they're getting value from our product, as well as just understanding the change in the industry. So between buyer personas changing, whether it's through social commerce, whether it's through different agendas on the digital marketing team, and different focuses for the coming year, where TikTok is going to be versus Instagram, how engaging is video versus text, and this new world of AI and the metaverse. And, so we've got a huge team of marketeers who are dialed into this particular area. And so certainly they're a massive arm in our business and help us connect the dots with our customers. So we take a lot of direction from both just customer sentiment as well as industry trends.
Very good. Okay, we'll get into the topic we are going to discuss today, which is the move to remote. So as I mentioned at the top, like if you took a job 5, maybe even 3 years ago, you may have been offered a day a month to work from home and remote, and that was considered a perk. Roll on to the pandemic, and we all endured the stay-at-home orders and lockdowns, and we were forced then to work from home. So could you just give us a flavor, Ger, of how Sprout Social handled that kind of day one, everyone has to go home and work from home? How did you guys handle that and get on with it?
Yeah. So, it feels like yesterday, but it also feels like years ago at the same token. So, the first step was really to kind of acknowledge the situation and show vulnerability as a leader that this is very new and we probably have more questions than answers. So, a lot of people talked about the fact that we were working from our homes and we were going to this new remote setting. But the reality was, overnight, we went from an office environment to then working from our homes during a global pandemic. And everyone was feeling anxious and had a lot of uncertainty. And there was no timeline as to how long this would last. Would it be a week? Would it be a couple of months? Would it be, what we saw in the end was like over 2 years. So just first of all, acknowledging that we don't know the answer and being very open about the fact that this isn't just limited to one piece of the business. Every single person in the business was experiencing some level of anxiety with this. And then this next step was really to try to create space and time to be able to discuss, well, what does it really mean to our people, right? So we've got different teams in different locations who have different coping mechanisms with regards to this, right? So we've got people who use the office environment as their natural place to recharge and their natural place to connect, where they needed those relationships from their colleagues just to do their job, right? They were very much, it's a community-driven business. So we've got people who there's friendships and there's really close ties in the office. All of a sudden that's ripped away from you. So like, how do you cope with that, right? And we had people who were just new to Ireland who just got their visas approved to leave their home countries to come and work in Ireland. And all of a sudden they're being asked to stay in their homes with no connectivity to the team. We had to bring people, there was people due to go to Chicago and people who were in Chicago had to come back early from their onboarding training and cut it short, because normally we spend 3 weeks with all our new hires going to Chicago, which is our headquarters, and they had to be brought back prematurely and early as well. So they had to go through a whole reboot and re-education and relearning in a new job, which in itself is pretty, scary. Certainly when they're trying to come to grips with a new role and a new environment. And so they were the kind of things that kind of just impacted us quickly, where it was a case of, okay, what are the obvious things that we can do? So things like just allowing people to expense back broadband, giving people some credit towards like office setup, whether it's buying a desk, buying a chair, buying an earpiece, whatever you need to try to work in an effective manner. A number of our people, they're sharing apartments, they're sharing houses. So they had to all of a sudden end up with 3 or 4 people all on the same connection trying to do their day job exclusively on Zoom, right? So you can imagine that all created its own distractions. But I think the other piece then was like really saying to the team, well, look, we're facing the same storm, but we're navigating it a little bit differently. And so, we started to ask the team and just crowdsource and say, well, look, what are you doing, right? What are your rituals? What are your habits? How are you keeping yourself sane? We use WhatsApp, we use video, we use Slack, we use email. We try to use different methods to get the team talking and sharing and just try to keep the spirit up. And, we have like a kind of a seven core principles of how we work as a business. And we try to kind of really keep that momentum going and try to really lean into those focus areas so that we could say, well, look, this isn't a race. How you're coping doesn't necessarily mean you're further behind or further ahead than your colleague. Everyone has a different rhythm to this. But at the same token, you can't have toxic positivity either, where you don't acknowledge the reality. So it's kind of somewhere in between, where you were saying, look, we get it. It's hard. We recognize it's hard. We're supporting you. We get that you won't be at your very best A game during these next few months, but let's lean in together and just try to maintain some level of steadiness. I think people appreciated that honesty and authenticity, you know.
It's just something I want to bring you in there. Just something that Jared said about allowing people the space and time to adjust, and the time to get themselves set up, and maybe even then having specific times to disconnect. So that's something I know you're quite hot on, is the managing the distractions. I know the dog is kicking off in the background there. Classic when I go to you for a question. But yeah, so what I want, the question is, or what I wanted to ask you about is, I think the lines blurred. Like, we used to be able to go to the office and then leave, and we knew we were finished work. Finished work in theory. We could do it in the evening if we wanted to, but we were out of work. And those lines got blurred with the working from home. So how did you find, or what did you hear anecdotally, ways of people managing the distraction or managing the ability to have, like, okay, I've been at the kitchen table working, and now I'm at the kitchen table, but I'm not working. So how do I make that distinction, even though nothing has really changed?
Yeah, I mean, look, the thing is, right, when you're in a situation where you can't control the controllable, like, work is probably the place where we can all at least control something. So in the first few months, like, we saw a huge spike in productivity, where, like, people were just on, and they were online continuously, and they were throwing everything at it. And I was worried, because, like, the first few months, like, okay, is this going to stop? And it just wasn't sustainable, right? Because you could see, people were online till late, and they were responding to stuff, Slacks and emails, and typically people who wouldn't normally be online. So I found it myself. Like, I think, there was an article, I think it was in Fast Company, where they surveyed a number of leaders and businesses during those first 6 months, and they all kind of admitted that everyone just threw themselves into work while in that kind of uncertainty phase, because they felt like, if I show that I am connected, and I show that I'm online, and I show that I care, it might just keep me in good stead. So we just kind of said to the team, being very honest, like, look, I know you can't go away on holidays. You can't take the flight to the beach you normally take, or you can't go off to the sunset and have an umbrella drink, but you do have holidays. You're building them up. Like, take a couple of days, like, rest at home, maybe extend your weekends, try and take a Monday and a Friday off. So trying to get them to respect their leave of absence, because they earned it, so they might as well try and use it. We also tried to get people to just switch off. And so in the evenings, making sure as a leader that we're not sending our own communications, that we come off Slack, so we lead by example. And so the more that people see us switching off, the more effect that has on people to buy into it. We also kind of brought in, like, well, we had it already, but we definitely doubled down on Focus Wednesday, where we use Wednesdays to not plan meetings, and we try and just do, like, cerebral work on a Wednesday. So kind of broke up the week a little bit and gave people some space. And we also kind of just really doubled down on people having to rest and recharge. And we actually took it another step further by bringing in an R&R day once a month. So we still have that, actually, where we give everyone an extra day off on top of their usual PTO, just to have an R&R day. And we encourage people just to switch off, like, not be online, and do something, fun or worthwhile on us. And so those kind of like messages, I think, went a long way. Initially, people were a little bit kind of, yeah, but I want to save my holidays so that when things do recover, I can go away. But after, like, 6 months, when people saw that, okay, this is probably going to last a little bit longer than we first thought, we started to see people then doing, like, little spa days at home, or when we could go beyond the 5-kilometer radius, then they were starting to meet up with people and do, like, drinks in the park and stuff like that. So that was important, because that spike in productivity for the first few months, that was not going to sustain it. We want to end up with massive burnout unless you got ahead of it,
Yeah, bring you in there now. So, like,
Yeah.
I think the 2K limits and this is new. Well, what else am I going to do? There's nothing else I can do. I'll just work. So how, like, what were you hearing, Niall, about people trying to use boundaries and protect themselves in that environment?
Yeah, I mean, it was a massive challenge for everyone, really, wasn't it? I mean, it was just completely out of the blue, and none of us knew exactly what the right answers were. But it definitely was something where, obviously, as you know, I devoted my career to distraction control and understanding what gets in the way and how you kind of focus your mind on what's important. And for me, one of the most important things working from home, and I wrote an article about this at the beginning of the week, was about, like, the walk and talk meetings and this opportunity to get outdoors and escape. I mean, we all love our families, but it's you need a break from them. When you're living, working, and eating in the same space, it becomes a challenge. And actually, something, Jared, I'd love to ask you is in relation to the way it was then and what you guys did. And I know you guys have a very modern, open approach to leadership, and I saw that with the leadership team I worked with. But how do you guys kind of look at that in relation to going forward in the future? Because I'm assuming the remote element of this is here to stay with you now.
Yeah, I mean, like, thinking back to some of the things you mentioned there, like even the walking one-on-ones, like just getting on WhatsApp, throwing an earpiece in and going for a walk for an hour and using that hour to have your normal one-on-one instead of over a Zoom, right? Like if you're not sharing something, then yeah, getting out and having that conversation while you're walking definitely was a big help. And so there's just some habits that we took during the period that we've kind of kept. So even simple things like we think about our standards, like and our value system, like we've got those values like care deeply, embrace accountability, champion diversity, equity and inclusion, promote open, authentic communication, seeking simplicity, and try and solve hard problems while also celebrating change. So they're like the 7 principles that we as a company try to embody. And so like even something as simple as, going back to at the team level, at the kind of like manager to team, say a ratio of 6-to-1 or 7-to-1 ICs to leader, getting together in a Zoom setting, because again, we were remote, having a conversation. Okay, what's our team mission, right? We're now in this. So what's our mission while we're here? How do we show up together? What are the agreeable standards between one another? What's the common language that we can use together and challenge one another if someone's down or somebody's being, a bit negative? How can we kind of reverse it a little bit? And we use different techniques. Like one technique we used is, and we still use, is called the accountability ladder. And it's basically a ladder, if you can imagine, up against a wall with several different steps. And there's this kind of imaginary white line in the middle. That's kind of below the white line is your victim mindset, and above the white line is your victor mindset. So everything below the white line is kind of like, oh, it's someone else's problem. Everything's broken. It's not my job. It's not my job description. Let's see and wait and see what happens. I'm not going to take an action. No, let's just leave it and see if somebody comes to me. And if someone does come to me, then I'll deal with it. And then above the line, then it's kind of like, okay, let's acknowledge the reality. What's broken? Do I have the ability to fix it? If I don't have the ability to fix it, do I know who can help me to fix it? And am I going to own it? Am I going to try and, take this to the next stage? And even having that imaginary accountability ladder meant that the team was able to at least have a common framework and a common language to at least remind one another when we have those down days, which we all had. But also if somebody is definitely staying down, trying to help them back above the line. So you might say, hey, Niall, you look like you're off today. You below the line. You might say, sorry, do you know what? The kid didn't sleep last night and yeah, I'm not feeling it today. Okay, cool. Well, look, you know what? No worries. Maybe take an hour or two early today if you need to, and let's get back tomorrow. So at least then that was like my way of expressing, I've noticed it, Niall. Niall's way of expressing, yeah, I know you noticed it and I'm glad you did, but okay, no worries, thanks for acknowledging and we'll come back tomorrow. As opposed to me saying nothing, him not acknowledging, and perhaps then having several more cycles of this conversation before we end up then with a problem. And so that was useful as well, that we used during both the pandemic as well as since then for our newbies coming in, just setting expectations and letting them know that we do have this language, and it's a framework that we use at all levels, so that people, even at my level, if somebody sees that I'm below the line, they can call me out. And so, it has to work both ways,
But it's so powerful. That's brilliant, because there's a whole thing in understanding that somebody who might normally be really at it isn't at it, or somebody who is extroverted might be suddenly withdrawn in meetings, and understanding that it is a massive challenge of the remote world, is understanding that people are trying to juggle, like there is no work-life balance, there is no separation of work and home life. So it's kind of just it being acknowledged. Now, there might be times you acknowledge it and somebody says it's none of your business, but at least you're acknowledging it. And you're, and it also creates an atmosphere then where there's a possibility for a conversation where, it might be a difficult conversation where somebody goes, actually, I have a problem with something we're doing here. And, but at least you're addressing it in the moment instead of letting it fester and build and cause problems in the long term. Sorry, Gus, I cut you off there.
No, I was just going to say that's really powerful, because if you think about it, like before pandemic and working from home, Like, we wouldn't have been great at that anyway. And even if you were in a team meeting and sitting around and you noticed someone off, you mightn't say anything because you knew that person was probably going to walk out and go for a coffee or bump into someone at the water cooler or at the kettle or wherever. And you knew they were probably going to meet someone who might be able to help them, or their real friend, if you like. Like, your team is your team, but they might be your real friends, if you know what I mean. You might get on great with them and work great with them, but they might be your real friends. So you knew in the office or on site, you know, Jer's not at it, but he's going to see Steve in a second, and Steve will, you know, sort him out. So it just got really hard to do that online. And it's actually super refreshing to hear, Jer, that you did that. You actually gave a platform to vocalize it, that to be people, to be allowed to say, I'm just not at it today, folks. I'm below the line. Or B, someone be able to recognize it in other people and say, are you below the line? Are you okay? Is everything okay? Like, do you need, what can we do? Like, you know, is there half an hour we could do that'll get you out of that funk? You know, so that was just really powerful. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
One thing, just to move it on, lads, one thing I would like to kind of throw up for debate is there is a lot of chat about how hard it is to connect when we're working remotely. And it does present, it's not like plain sailing, it does present challenges. But this is a poll we ran back in October, just as October 2021, just as things were starting to get back to normal and we were going back into the office. And overwhelmingly, people were still in favor of at least hybrid, so a mix of on-site and remote. And there was the same amount saying fully remote as back on-site. So people have, I think, come accustomed to the idea of not being in the office, whatever about all day, every day. Like, you know, a couple of days a week, I think, is what people prefer, like a mix of a bit of home, bit of office. So even though there are the challenges, why, Jared, do you think people prefer the hybrid or remote model?
Yeah, I mean, like, seeing even my own team, they'd very much be in the hybrid category as well. And so as a company, we haven't mandated a certain amount of days per week or per month. We've said that we're going to stay hyper flex. And if people want to come in every day, they're more than welcome. If they want to stay at home fully remotely, they're more than welcome. And equally, if they want to come in 1 or 2 days and just flex to their own schedules, they're more than welcome. And so when we look at our office, we can see, based on who swipes in and out, who are the different people coming in different days, and what days have the higher frequency of footfall. And so no surprises, like Thursday is quite popular because typically Thursday is the day where people come in together, they connect, and normally they go off and have a couple of pints or they'll go for dinner in the city. So we've noticed now, based on that trend, it hasn't reversed and it looks like it's going to continue. So we can now reimagine our workspace a little bit differently, where we're not going to be paying for more desk banks. We're actually going to pull back on the desk banks. We're going to repurpose that space into more lounge space and game space and kind of more collab space, with whether it's through high seating or whether it's through bench styles. And we're going to start to bring in then more of that kind of AV setup where we have like music and video and different games in that space to break it up, so that when people do come in for maybe like 4 or 5 hours on that Thursday, they can come in, connect, work, be able to have the banter, check in with their community, and then head off again, and know that no one's going to be looking for them in the office till the following Thursday to come back again, right? So there's no looking over the shoulder trying to keep tabs to see who was in, who was out. So that's allowed us to rethink of our cost model for real estate, as well as just how we set up our space to suit our employees' needs. But then second to that, then the other piece is really around, you know, the things that people have now enjoyed. So, you know, whether it's taking the kids to school, whether it's cooking, you know, a decent meal in the evening and not being stuck inside in the car, bumper to bumper, and a commute. Like, those things people have now enjoyed these last 2 years, they're not going to give up. And even from an employee engagement perspective, we typically survey our teams every 6 months, and we measure our engagement ratio, and we look to see, do our employees, are our employees highly engaged, and would they refer friends and family to the company? And not only has our engagement rate sustained during the pandemic, it's actually increased in our favor because of some of the things that we've done. So we've got a highly engaged team. We've got very low attrition rate of people leaving, which is a good sign. And we're kind of just, you know, trying to meet the team where they want to be met in terms of the things they're asking for. And so we look at the feedback, we take on board the themes, and then we action them. So again, some stuff they're asking for we can't do right now, and there's some things that will take some time. But for the most part, if people see you're listening and you're willing to at least tackle some of those challenges, certainly it does help the team feel more connected as well.
I think there's real power in that you're actually like, the power of listening is it's so important, but it's also, it takes away the feel of a gimmick. Like some companies, like they do these nap pods and slides and whatever you want to do, and they're kind of gimmicks to make it seem cool. But what you're actually doing is you're listening to what your people actually want, and I think that's so cool. And what it does there is it empowers people then to feel, I suppose it emboldens them to stand up and speak their mind and say, look, this is what I need to be at my best. And it's something that I definitely have learned from sport over the years, is, this ability to be able to say, look, I can't function at my best if this kind of environment exists. So, there's finding that balance between the coaches bending over and giving the players everything they want, but also the players having a voice in the direction the team is going, which is exactly what you're talking about there, which I think is very, very cool. One thing I was wondering about, Jaron, one of the things I thought was kind of cool about the day I came in and spoke to your leadership team was, we did this team check-in, which is something obviously we do in our app, and it gives us an opportunity, and it gives leaders an opportunity to gauge where a team are at, and then it gives you the option to kind of make decisions off the back of it. You obviously are somebody who's kind of regularly kind of stress testing where your people are at. How important do you think it is to have a regular kind of check-in with teams to understand, like, what level are you at, where are you feeling, how's the emotion like, and then how do you kind of plan your actions off the back of that to ensure that somebody doesn't raise an issue and it's just ignored and moved on from, that there's always, it's been listened to and there's an action off the back of it?
Yeah, I mean, like, we come together as a team every week at a leadership level, and at least every 3 to 4 weeks we do like a team health check, or like just to go around the horn and hear from each leader to see how are the different members of the team doing, is there any common issues that are coming up, and anything that's noteworthy for other leaders to be aware of. And so we try and encourage that kind of community dialogue, and that's quite helpful because you'll start to hear some pockets on the left or pockets on the right, and there might be, okay, there's something brewing here, let's kind of keep an eye on it. But there's also, and every team has this, there's what we call culture champions in every team. And they're the guys and girls in the team who don't have the official authority, but they're the people who people gravitate towards. And I've got several of those people in my team who I know who they are. I know what they're about. Like, they're deeply connected to the business. They're very loyal to what we're doing, and they care deeply about where we're headed. So they have the eyes and ears of the team. And so I very often tap into those culture champions and say, listen, what's going on the floor, or what's happening, what's the chatter, and where are people at? Are they at a battery level? Are we in the red here? Are we in the green? Like, do we need to do some recharge? What are people looking for? And that's where I get a lot of sources of information, because they say, well, look, actually some of the team are saying, because of Christmas and because of the COVID restrictions, we couldn't get a Christmas party. They'd love to get together in person. I was, okay, well, look, let's work on something, even something simple. And, we go off, we do some costing, we get it together, and all of a sudden we have a night together where we're in Dublin and we're out until the wee hours of the morning celebrating together. And just something as simple as that just got everyone pumped back up again, and a chance to kind of, recharge. Or somebody might say to me, you know what, actually there's a few questions murmuring around career progression, and people want to know, are we pulling back on career progression because of the pandemic, or are we still focusing on it? So that might trigger me then in my next all hands to then go deep on career progression and make sure people know how many people have progressed, how many people have unlocked the next level in their progression, how many people are we supporting in their career journey, because it mightn't be widely known. I might know it, but the average team member might know the full stats. And all of a sudden, when they see, 35 people got promoted last month, okay, interesting, didn't know that. All of a sudden, then that kind of breeds its own success. So between the official feedback from the team, between the unofficial culture champions getting a little bit of the voice of the team that way, and then the other piece then, like, is in one-on-ones. Instead of going into one-on-one and having our laundry list of all the business metrics and KPIs and revenue and all the stuff you want to cover, like, just taking a bit of time to spend the first 20, 30 minutes just checking in with the person and say, look, where are we at? How are you feeling? How are the team? Where are you distracted this month, or where are you behind, or where can I help, support you, or is there something in particular that you're working on this coming month that you think is going to be really beneficial for the next few months? What is it? What does it look like, and why are you focusing on it? But even just having those first 30 minutes to even just speak that way, as opposed to go through your laundry list of items, like some of those items you can just get on an email or get an async. You don't need to spend that live time talking about stuff that just feels like very repetitive. So trying to change up a little bit like that can definitely help people open up,
One thing I just want to share, the last thing I want to share, which will lead to a question here. Another poll we did was just asking about how would you describe managers, and I'll change it to your phrase, Niall. How would you find your current manager's essential skills rather than soft skills? And Gallup had a stat saying that only 10% of managers were actually good at being managers, like fully tooled up and fully aware of what their role was as a manager. Our poll is saying that it's maybe about 25% of the 66 who returned. So there's potentially, 7 or 8 out of 10 managers who are either okay or quite poor. So the question is, I suppose I'll throw to you now first, is, we in Pep Talk, we say things like teams are the center of gravity for an organization. But the manager within that team is the axis that team spins on, or the fulcrum that it's levered off. Like, how important is the manager's role in getting that team humming? I'll throw it to you first now.
Essential is the short answer. I think what's interesting is that probably most of the leadership development expenditure across the globe gets spent on the C-suite or the top level of organizations. But the people who are the future of your organization are the middle managers. And the people who have probably the most impact on the day-to-day and the mood and the motivation are the middle managers in an organization. And finding, if you can get check in there and you can get an understanding of the importance of connection and authenticity and transparency and all these things that we talk about, you then can change the culture of an environment. And, and I always talk about culture being relationships. People can speak all day long about attrition or culture or whatever word you want. But for me, the reason that organizations do well and hold on to their people is they have strong relationships, like Jar has with Sprout Social. And the reason that companies tend to churn staff a lot is generally down to the fact that they don't have strong relationships. In fact, they've broken relationships, and it's usually down to the role of managers. There's a lot of pressure on managers, and particularly in a remote environment when you haven't any experience of how to manage people remotely. There's an onus on companies. I think the big change in the business world in the next couple of years is how we identify leaders, because our leaders are not. It's not traditional. I've talked many times about, the insanity of the number one salesperson becoming the sales manager, because the skills you need to be the number one salesperson are entirely different to what you need to be a manager. But what are the skills a leader needs in this changing world, and this world where recognizing, as Jar was talking about there, about checking in with your team and understanding where they're at and figuring out, how to deal with challenges when they arise. That's a very different skill set to what a traditional manager in the past would have had, which was very much I'll stand in front of the room and tell you all what to do. And it's something, Jared, that we spoke about the day I came to you guys was, you don't want somebody coming in and doing leadership training, putting up a PowerPoint presentation and going, this is number one thing you need to do as a leader. This is number two. This is number three. What you want is conversations to bring people into thinking about, how do I develop a relationship so these people will come with me on a journey of whatever direction we want to go?
Yeah, no, exactly. Look, it's the frontline leadership layer of any team. Like, it's where the rubber hits the road. And very often, great cultures get destroyed or get dismantled very quickly by that layer being, massively mismanaged and misdirected. So, things like EQ, and we talked about this even back when we were in the office phase, like having a good understanding of EQ and knowing how to apply it, and knowing how to get the best from people and build those relationships. It's like the Dale Carnegie book, how to win friends and influence people. Like, it's those like nuggets of just good relationship hygiene that is imperative. And as a leader, like, I've got 3 pillars to my job. One is I need to attract top talent to want to come and work for me and my team and my company. My second pillar is when those people come and they walk away from another job or put their credibility in the line or their livelihood on the line to come and join the team, I need to make sure that they perform in role and have the ability to unlock as many promotional opportunities or whatever career aspirations they have while in my care. And then the third piece then is when the time comes and they do leave me, which will naturally happen, they leave not only in a better place than where I found them, but they go on to bigger, better things. But they also leave as an advocate for where they came from, and they become a billboard for Sprout in the future. Those 3 basic principles of how to just build longevity and talent density can be very quickly forgotten. And what many people also forget is that you might be in a career right now today in a company where you're sat at the minute, but fast forward 10 years from now, you will have people follow you from company to company to company if they believe in the leader and they buy into their value system. I've got people working for me from 4 jobs ago.
Right.
Like, that's just how it is, right? Because you, as a leader, you should be collecting people along the way.
Yeah.
And so those critical skills or the soft skills you mentioned, they're skills gaps that we had in the office environment. They're the skills gaps that will become far more magnified in a remote setting than ever before. And so we recognize that ourselves. And actually, we put in place our own internal leadership training course during the pandemic, where we took some of the best leaders in different categories of like coaching, planning, around performance management. And we just had those leaders basically do like kind of a 101 for all of our leadership teams. We call it like Rise. And it was built on the basis that we want to equip the leaders with some of these extra skills that we know some of them have some flavor for, but we can all just improve upon. And we've actually carried that through now as well, where at least once a month we come together as a global leadership team and we have different leaders lead certain themes in those months, and we all just participate and we walk away with some extra nuggets. Because again, like, yes, I might know a lot from my career, but what I know in a situation, I very often find that I become enlightened by hearing from the team a different perspective or a different point of view of how that's manifested. And so it keeps me sharp as well, hearing that feedback,
That's brilliant. I love that. I love those 3 points you made there about how like people leaving the company is always deemed the worst thing in the world, but your approach or your way of thinking it, they're like, no, you're going to leave. There's an ambassador. If you do right by that person, there's an ambassador leaving this company who'll ultimately probably bring good people into a Sprout in some way, shape, or form if they interact with them. Just before we wrap it up, guys, we've got a question from Aidan McLaughlin in Indeed. Hey, Aidan, thanks a million for the question. He wants to know from Jer. You're smiling. I'm guessing you know Aidan. We know Aidan in Pep Talk. So, he wants to know from Jer, but I will throw it to you as well, Niall. Jer, in your experience, what do people get wrong about wellness and happiness at work?
Very often it can be forced because it's a big theme, and the people that are trying to bring it to life have the best of intentions, but very often it can feel either forced or disingenuous. So certainly in my experience, I think it's about leaning into those people who know this area or have like deep domain knowledge or expertise, having their expertise come in and use that expertise to try and plant new approaches or new thoughts or new ways of thinking. So even for ourselves, like DEI is a huge investment for us as a company, and we actually had some DEI speakers come in just even during the middle of the pandemic, just to hear from other marginalized communities and other groups, just in terms of how this was affecting some of these groups that we couldn't even comprehend because we were so stuck in our own bubbles. And I found that quite fascinating as a little bit of a reality check. But equally, like one of the team actually, they did a session for us where they talked about some of the Zoom fatigue and how it was a real subject. And even like this idea that everyone must have their camera on, because if your camera is on, you're engaged and we can see you engaged. But actually, the team just walked us through how for some people having the camera on all day long seeing themselves in meetings was creating its own level of anxiety. And it was also creating this idea of beauty stigma and like imagery issues for people, which I never even thought of. But like the team brought it up, and it was really fascinating to hear from them, that because they had done some studies on this and they had seen it as a real thing. So I think just being really open that you don't know all the answers, but letting the team bring in education, either third party or themselves, and actually just listening to them. And I found that I learned a lot about where the team were at just from those conversations.
I think I just to echo that, Gus, and probably, I mean, I wouldn't add much, but the one thing I would say is I think listening to people is so important, because I think one of the mistakes companies make is they prescribe what the solution to what they believe wellness is. So you'll talk to a company and they'll say, oh yeah, well, we take care of that. We get, we gave them a gym pass, or we get somebody to come in and talk about addiction, once a year. And it's like that's solving the problem, but it's not, because your team are made up of a bunch of individuals with very, very different backgrounds, very, very different needs, very, very different kind of relationships, different mindsets, mentalities, and understanding that all of us have different struggles and we're all motivated differently. So, the more you can listen to what the environment is telling you, the more you can address those challenges then by being broader. Like D&I is a great example, Ger, and one of the big challenges for companies, I feel, over the last couple of years is there's loads of roles were created throughout the pandemic for D&I people, or DE&I, or whatever you want to call it. An awful lot of those people might be looking for jobs in the next year or two, because the problem is that companies invested heavily in the diversity side of things, which is the easy to measure thing. You can say how many people of a different race or a different gender type or whatever the case may be you have in an organization, but how inclusive is your organization? And it's the inclusivity is the big challenge for companies. And that's about listening to people, as Jar said, the experienced people who know what they're talking about, who go, yeah, it's great. There's, 2 extra women on our board. Great. But do those women actually, are they given a voice? Are they allowed to express themselves, or are they just shot down by all the men? And it's that balance of finding what is the need for each individual, and then how do you address that across the board, which obviously is a big part of the team connection piece that we believe in, because we see well-being as a key element of team connection, team engagement, team performance. And that's kind of where the whole principle of pep talk came from.
Yeah, I'll just throw my tuppence on that last one. Sean Acor is a great book, The Happiness Advantage, and he talks about how businesses quite often put success on the opposite side of happiness, and they say you will be happy if we get successful, so let's work on the success bit, when actually it's the reverse. It should be, if we're happy, we will work harder and we will be ultimately more successful. And it's not that to be happy you have to forget about work and it's just about the happiness. It's not. It's happiness in work. And if you can get happy workers doing what they're supposed to be doing, obviously, you will become ultimately more successful. So for me, that the way he framed that happiness and success being on the opposite side is wrong. It should be they're joined up, and nearly focusing on the happiness bit will bring more success or bring it quicker. So that's my 2 cents anyway on that. Look, that is a world record for the Pep Talk live stream. Now we blasted through 40 minutes. Ger, I'm glad we gave it the time, because it was a fascinating discussion. So I certainly wasn't going to try and wrap it up early just to do it in half an hour. Fantastic insights. I'm sure you'll have people. You will be inundated with CVs in your LinkedIn after they've heard what a great place Sprout Social is.
We always great problem to have. We always are.
yeah, great problem to have. So look, I will thank you for your time and attention, Ger. As always, Niall, thanks for your time, and we will see you next Thursday, folks.
Yeah, thanks. See you.
Take care, guys.